It's a huge honour to be here and be asked to talk to the Aviation Historic Society on flying the Mosquito. It's fantastic. Any questions? I am extremely honoured to be able to fly this aeroplane. There's no question about that. There are only two of us flying it, Dave Phillips and myself. Dave's also got a place in Tauranga. He spends a lot of time down here, and he also owns that Hawker Hunter over there. Excuse me. So, a very capable guy. To get into one of these, you have to be invited, like most of the airplanes, unless you've got the big checkbook.
Yeah.
And luckily I was invited to fly this airplane many months ago. I was talking to Glenn 30 years ago when he said he was going to build an airplane. I thought he was nuts, but I'm really pleased he persevered. And now we have this wonderful machine behind us. The requirements really at this stage, you've probably heard about what I've been doing, but it pays to sort of be around in the aviation scene for quite a while before you get into one of these, particularly with a bit of tail dragger time. That's the tail wheel at the back. And I've been lucky enough to test fly a few airplanes with Merlins, Spitfires and Tim Wallace's Hurricane. So coupled with a bit of Air Force time and Bristol Freighters and DC-3s and things, I sort of fitted the mould that they were looking for. And I was also lucky to meet Jerry many years ago when I flew his P40. There were still some pretty well-known chaps around here. A couple here tonight, Dave and Mel Gunton, who flew Mosquitoes after the war. And they've all got extremely acute memories, and they were able to tell us some quite amazing stuff. But we read every single book we could find on the aeroplane, and there's lots of books written about the Mosquito, most of it good, but in fact it's not good. It's quite bad in a lot of ways. If one of these big fans stops here, as my compatriot Dave Phillips says, the aeroplane starts to grow horns, and it really does. But they developed a system whereby on takeoff, the pilot's notes say lead with one engine, and that means that the propellers, if you look at them closely, the propellers go both one way, which create quite a lot of gyroscopic effect and airflow over the tailplane, which makes the airplane swing. Now all tail dragger, high-powered airplanes, Spitfires, Hurricanes and so on, all do that. And the rudder's got to try and keep it straight, and the guy working the rudder. But these are particularly prone because such large engines, big bladed propellers, huge bladed propellers there, and the small rudder. So once you open the power on the aeroplane, it's got a tendency to start swinging. The only way to keep it straight is with brake at that stage, and the brakes are drum brakes, pneumatically controlled, with a handle up here, with spring loaded. And it's about a 1 second delay between and what happens. And they're not very good because they're discs. Anyone who's driven a Modest Minor recently will know what I'm talking about. And a what? Drums, sorry. I mean drums, sorry. So before we even get going, we've got a big swing going, which is dangerous. So George got on to us and said to us, the way we taught the guys was to go to zero boost. And what we say zero boost is 30 inches of mercury, doesn't matter the technical side of it, but it's about half power. 30 inches of boost, make sure the brakes are set evenly and let it go. And we've had no problem at all. The airplane is kept perfectly straight on all our takeoffs so far. We take it up to what we call 13 inches, which is a hell of a lot of power, 56, 58, doesn't matter, a lot of power. It's more than I've ever used in a Spitfire or a Hurricane. It's about the same as we use in the Corsair. And even at those power settings, the airplane stays remarkably straight. If we get airborne, the cockpit is not designed for a pilot, believe it or not. It was designed like most of the Second World War British airplanes, and someone's already described it as an ergonomic slum. There's bits and pieces all over the place. The Americans designed airplanes beautifully, the Germans designed airplanes beautifully, whereby the pilot had the control column in the right hand and the throttles and the propellers in the left hand. Only the Brits could ask you to change that over to bring the undercarriage up. The rest of the world, you just moved your hand to move the lever. So after we get airborne in the Mosquito, we put the brakes on and off to stop the big wheels turning around, and then we have to change hands and then bring the undercarriage up. You'll notice the wobble after takeoff. That happens. It's worse than We wait to accelerate to 190 mile an hour. And at 190 mile an hour, Warren and I stop sweating because that's safety speed. So between liftoff and 190 mile an hour, if we have an engine failure, we've lost the engine, basically, unless we're extremely practiced, extremely fast, and everything works properly. And I don't put myself in that category at the moment. But basically what happens is, if the motor stops, there's a huge amount of drag from the propeller, from the engine that's failed. So the aeroplane will turn towards that. The rudder's not big enough, as I've already said, to keep the aeroplane straight, and there's a huge amount of drag with the undercarriage hanging down. So the first thing we do if something like that happens is pull the undercarriage up. Unfortunately, there is a hydraulic pump on each engine, and these hydraulic pumps provide pressure to bring up the undercarriage. If you lose one engine, you've lost one hydraulic pump. So it takes 45 seconds for the other undercarriage to come up. At the meantime, the perspiration is starting to flow. If you can then quick enough to get your hand back to take some power off the live engine to stop the aeroplane turning, because there's too much power on that side, you'll start to descend into the weeds. If you're then really fast, I've got a good man on the right-hand seat to help me, what we call feather the engine. And we then change hands again and press a feather button, which stops the propeller and turns the propeller into wind, so it creates no drag. So if we can get the undercarriage up, get the power off in the live engine, get that engine feathered, and get to 190 mile an hour, we're sweet. So at 190 mile an hour, we stop perspiring.
So what airspeed does it lift off at to give you that
120.
worry? 120. So
120.
You've got 70 miles an hour.
70 mile an hour. It's quite a way. After the airplane gets airborne, we are using a cruise power, quite a high power setting, and I'm talking to the historic guys here now. We're using 2400 and plus 4 inches, which is really climb power in a Spitfire. And the reason we use the high power is you'll notice that the propellers are very, very close to the fuselage here, and it creates a vibration in the propellers and forms a problem that Warren can tell you about in the gearboxes. So we run them at a very high RPM, which stops harmonics. Is that right? Sort of. Sounds good. And that gives us a speed of about 260, 270 mile an hour in cruise. As you're probably well aware, this was the fastest piston engine aircraft in the world when it was first built, and the enemy hated it because it could do well over 350 mile an hour straight and level. We never ever use that power. It's available here. We can go to plus 18 inches, which is another 5 inches more of boost. That doesn't mean much to you, but believe me, it's a hell of a lot more power. So, as my compatriot said, you wouldn't really want to start a dogfight with anything here, except perhaps a Mustang, which can't dogfight, and leg it, full power and go. We are looking after the aeroplane very, very carefully. We're not using much power on it. We're not really going more than about 320, 330 mile an hour, which is all I was using here today. It's very, very manoeuvrable. It's not light on the controls. At low speed, it's very, very light in the controls. But at high speed, I took a couple of friends for a ride this afternoon. They'll notice I had both hands on the control column to turn the aeroplane. But once you get it turning, it's got quite a nice rate of roll. And you'll notice that today we were turning quite a nice rate of bank. So a very, very nice aeroplane to go to war in. Is that right, Dave? Very nice aeroplane to go to war in, because you got to leg it and you can get away from the bad guys. Most World War II aeroplanes did what they call a buzz and brake, and that's to come in fast across the field with a lot of power on, and then close the throttles at the end of the field and reduce speed by climbing quite sharply and quite high, and almost do a glide approach and come down and land. And the idea of that was for 2 reasons really. The first one was to keep energy up in case you're being chased by the bad guys. So you arrived over your field going as fast as you possibly could, so you had the energy to turn around and go back and fight the bad guy if he was chasing you while you came into land. The other reason was that earlier on in the war, the aeroplanes were a bit prone to engine failure, and it was a good idea to glide the aeroplane, so if the motor stopped, you're always going to make the runway. We haven't got that luxury in this aeroplane, so it's quite a performance. The undercarriage comes down at 200 mile an hour, and we start using flap at 170 mile an hour, and we come around what we call base to come to land at 150 mile an hour, and we have to decide by 800 feet whether we're going to land or not. Any lower than 800 feet, if we have an engine failure, we can't go around. So we're committed to land, so the air traffic controller has to say to us, we are clear to land. Landing the aeroplane is, to be honest, it's quite simple. Putting it on the ground is quite easy. What we're doing at the moment is called a wheeler, and that is we're landing it on the main wheels and allowing the tail wheel to drop. During the war, there was a difference of opinion whether you three-point the aeroplane, which means landing it with the tail wheel and the mains at the same time, and the people who did that maintained it stayed straighter, easier, but they were operating off big square grass paddocks into wind. We have always got a crosswind here, or most aerodromes in New Zealand. We wheel it on and keep it straight in the air and let the tail wheel drop down when it's virtually around of airspeed. And that's when it gets exciting, because once again, the brakes are 1 second, and they're controlled by rudder, differential braking, and the tail wheel at the back is non-lockable. So it's a cast-ring tail wheel, just like the supermarket trolley. Most aeroplanes these days have a tail wheel that locked. So once the tail wheel was on the ground, the aeroplane remains straight. So I start perspiring from about 40 mile an hour downwards, and we've had a few interesting times. Unfortunately, in the last few weeks or so, the aeroplane started to bounce. I'm not sure why, but we're getting onto that one again now. So all in all, it's a delightful aeroplane to fly. It's a huge honour to fly the thing, there's no question about that. And I think we all, particularly Warren, but all of New Zealand, the aviation people of New Zealand, really have to give Jerry Yagan all the kudos. I mean, he just said to us today, I said, I'm talking to the Aviation Historic Society in Tauranga, can we bring the aeroplane down? Warren asked, and Jerry said, take it down and take a couple of friends for a ride. Quite amazing. No question.